All right, you guys saw the Libby salmon fly. We came out with that last year. We went and fished it. A whole bunch of other people fished it, and it poked a whole bunch of fish last year. We have a new version of it. It's a different color, so check it out.
Dude, that's a big brown, bro.
This is the fly, but I'm not going to show it to you until you like and subscribe, okay? So you better do it right now, or I will maybe, we're going to think of something really bad, but you got to do this, okay? All right, ready, set, go. Fly disappeared. Now you have to watch the video. On this fly, we've made just a few tweaks to it. It's pretty much the same tie as the salmon fly. And you can adjust size as much as you need. You know, you can tie this in the small sizes. You can tie it giant. We kind of picked the big size so it's easier to film. But anyway, I'm just going to get started. I've been using this Semperfly 6/0 thread quite a bit lately, and it's a great thread for big foam flies and just big dry flies in general. But anyway, I'll just dress the hook. I'm going to build up a little bit of a body, and so to do that, I'm just going to use some polypropylene yarn. We have tan. It doesn't really matter what color you use because you actually won't see it. So I'll tie it in about there. I'm leaving a little bit of space for the head on this fly. So I'll wrap it all the way back, and then I'm just going to quickly wrap this forward with my fancy rotary feature on the purple popsicle. So we'll get it up to the front, and we'll tie that off. And again, we're covering this all up, so I'm just going to take my thread and wrap back over it so I can get started. Now I'm going to tie in some tails on this one, but I don't want them coming out of the very back of the fly. So I'll build a little bit of a bulb. I just have some Hairtron dubbing. You can use any color Stonefly looking dubbing that you have in your collection. This stuff's really cool because it's got a little bit of Antron in it, but still has really good buggy profile. So I'm just going to create a little ball of dubbing in the back of the fly, and then you can use whatever rubber legs you want. I'm using this Life Flex from Hairline. They have a new size to it. It's size small. So I'll just tie that in like this. Make sure this leg's coming off of one side, and then I'll pull the other one down on the other side, and you pretty much have a forked tail like that. And you can see they splay out pretty far to the side. I'll show you how to tame that in just a second. Alright, one of the big changes is the other fly we use dubbing in a rib. We're just going to use this dirty bug yarn from Semperfly. This one's called Mottled Golden Olive. We're just going to pull off a healthy strip of this, and this is going to be our body. And we've opted not to put ribbing on this one. So again, I'm going to come up to where the polypropylene yarn ends and start there so that our body's nice and even. And the first turn of this yarn is going to be right over the top of these rubber legs. So what that does is it teases them back right at the perfect angle. And then from there, I'll just use my rotary feature to wrap this up the body. And as you can see, it's a really cool buggy yarn, and it won't absorb too much water. It's all synthetic. Okay, once I'm to this point, I'm actually going to back my thread up a little bit, and I'm going to tie in my wing here. And the reason why I tie it up here on the body is if I tied it in front of the body, the wing would have a really aggressive angle, and I just kind of want to tease it back a little bit. I'm also going to trim my tails a little. Alright, so just use whatever elk hair you have. I'm using like elk mane. You can use bull elk, you can use cow elk back strip, you can use whatever you want. But just get whatever hair you like and align those tips. Ooh, that's some turbo stacking. See that, Brigham?
Oh yeah.
Alright. I had one hair that was broken. I'll pull him out of there. And I'm just going to tie this wing so it goes a little bit past the body, and it should be pretty sparse. I'm just using this to kind of create a little bit of wing structure on the fly. And in the past, what I've done is I've kind of put a little crease in the hair, curved it back, and I don't really do that as much anymore, just because it all kind of comes out when you start fishing them anyway. All right, so now I'm going to take 2 to 3 pieces, depending on how good your CDC is. I'll take 2 to 3 pieces of like Dunish brown or brownish dun or just some darker color of CDC, and I'm going to line up 3 of them, and I'm just going to lay them right on top of that wing. Okay. So stoneflies have a whole bunch of legs just going out everywhere. So we're going to tie in another set of legs right here. Except for, I'm looking at this and I actually want my thorax to be a little bit longer than that. So I'm going to make a quick adjustment, and I'll just wrap my thread back a little bit, and that's where my thorax will start. Take one of these legs, I'm going to tie it in on one side, kind of like we did the tail, where I'll just secure it down on one side, pull it down over the other way, and then just tie it in on the other side. Or you can tie them in one at a time. Not going to hurt my feelings. That leg is going to be just shorter than the wing-ish. Doesn't really matter. Okay, so for this thorax, I've just chosen this color. They call this brown olive, but it's just like a perfect golden stone. And then this one's called khaki. It's just like a dark dun overwing. But for the thorax, I've taken 2 of each of the feathers, and I've loaded them up into this hairline feather prepper, and I'm going to grab those out of here with my fancy Swiss CDC tool. If you haven't seen our video on how to use this tool, we have a really cool YouTube video. So the CDC ends up like this, and I'm going to grab some scissors with a long blade and trim that out of there. Trim the stems out. So what I'm doing is I'm trimming the stems, cutting those out. So I end up with something like this. From here, I'll create a dubbing loop big enough to fit the Swiss tool in, a couple wraps, close off the loop, and then I'll go forward to where my big bump of material ends. From here, I'm going to use a dubbing twister to twist it up, and Brigham hit it from me. Here it is. This is my favorite one right now, the Smayan. It's really awesome. But anyway, let's drop that in there. We're not doing anything fancy with it. It's just being a dubbing twister. I'll take my Swiss clamp and I'll place that CDC in the loop. And probably tease it out to make it closer to the fly, and then maybe pull it one direction so that it's longer. From here, I'll just twist that all up. So there we have a pretty cool CDC hackle, and I'm just going to mash all that into that thorax area, just like that. So once that's in, we can take a brush tool. This is the Swiss CDC multi-brush. I really like it because you can get in tight. As you can see, I wrapped some thread around my brush to make it a little smaller. Plus, matches the vise. Is that not a baller move, Brigham? He's nodding his head. He said kind of. I don't appreciate that. All right, so we're gonna tie in some antenna. So go all the way to the front. I'm gonna tie one in, kind of adjust that over to one side of the hook, wrap back a little bit, and I'll bring the other one in on the other side. And see how nasty that looks. If I just grab those and kind of give them a quick pull, they'll sit right where I want them to. Kind of. Okay, antenna are in. Now we're going to make like a bullet head out of CDC. I know that sounds weird because it is. But I'm going to grab, 3 to 4 more pieces of CDC. And because we're using so many pieces, it doesn't have to be the highest grade. But if you do have the high grade stuff, feel free to use it. In today's day and age of supply chain, you kind of have to just use whatever you can get your hands on. Alright, so I have 2 of the grayish ones and 1 of the yellow all stacked up together. So I'm going to lay those down so that the grayish is on the bottom, because I'm going to fold that over. I want the gray to be on the top. But at the end of the day, it probably doesn't matter too much. Then I'm going to measure roughly the length of the fly. So I'm going to tie it in right here. That's kind of the length of the fly. I'll tie that in. And the beauty of this is, CDC is pretty messy and it gets everywhere, but that's why it works. So you don't have to be super clean when you're tying these. So then we'll build up a little head. Out of the same dubbing, we built up the little bulb on the back, and you can tie this and use this dubbing for the body too. It just takes a long time to dub it. So we've just created a little glob of dubbing right there, and I can adjust my antenna after the fact if I need to. In fact, I'm going to pull those down because I'm going to grab all this CDC and pull it back over the head and make a little head. Stoneflies have little tiny heads. So I'm going to now create like a band of thread a little bit, and then I'm going to add another set of legs with this same material. On the salmon fly version, we used a couple different types of rubber legs, and probably just too complicated. So we're using the same legs for the antenna, the tails, and the legs. Now this fly does ride pretty low. If you want, you can add a little indicator on top. On the salmon fly, I think we did, but we don't need to put it on this one. That's just kind of up to you. And these front legs are kind of shorter than the others. So anyway, we're all done. I'm just going to throw a hand whip finish in here because I got a lot of obstacles at the front of the fly. We probably need to do a hand whip finish video, right, Brig? Okay. So anyway, add your favorite head cement here. I'm just going to tag it with a tiny little bit of zap because that's what I got. And that's what you're looking for. When you fish this, it looks just like the real thing on the water. It sits down really low. The legs splay out. They're very visible. But anyway, if you've had the pleasure of fishing a good golden stone hatch, you know how important it is to have the right fly. Well, sometimes anyway. But anyway, this is a super fun fly to tie. Shout out to Jared and Libby for giving us this idea.